Up until a few years ago, cancer was almost a dirty word. Maybe that's because we were so afraid and had such a poor understanding of it. In the 1980s, people like Terry Fox helped to bring cancer out of the closet. We know now that cancer won't because we choose to ignore it. One of the first things we have to do is confront our own fears.
I know a couple of people that have been affected by cancer, and I know what they go through and the pain and how it affects them as well as their family. So yeah, I think it's something that we should be concerned about.
Cancer's on the rise. Like just this year, I've had 3 of my friends' parents die of cancer, and it's very scary.
You look around the corner, everyone has cancer now. You see it so much.
A few friends actually have recently been diagnosed, so we're hoping they'll be okay.
I was scared when I first found out that I had cancer because it was just such a shock. But I never thought that I was going to die or anything. I always had a positive attitude, like I just want to get this over with and get it behind me. My family doesn't have a history of cancer at all. I've never worked really in a place where I've been exposed to that I know cancerous materials. I think the environment probably had something to do with it. I must have been exposed to something in the environment that caused it.
In the 1930s, 1 in 10 people contracted cancer. In the 1970s, 1 in 5. Today, 1 in 3 people contract cancer.
1 in 4 will die from it.
Is it any wonder we're afraid? The World Health Organization says 70 to 90% of cancers are caused by exposures to agents in the environment, our food, water, air, and our communities and workplaces. That means that cancer is largely a result of human activity and choices.
You know, I think that the impact of the environment, especially in young people's lives with regard to the development of cancer, is extremely profound.
I think our environment plays a major role in our health. I mean, we breathe the air, we work outside. It's a big part of us.
There's so many things anymore. There's, skin cancer is one of the worst now. You can't even go outside for 20 minutes or they tell you to put sunscreen on. There's lots of chemicals in the environment.
All the factories and stuff, watching the smoke go up, and I mean, it's scary to watch. You don't know what's in that air, and we breathe in that air. We breathe that air every day, and Windsor has awful air.
I think that's evidenced by rising cancer rates. I mean, the more pollutants there are, sure you had cancer back in the last century, but it's certainly on the rise, and it's not just because there's more people, there's more chemicals.
The workplace often has even higher concentrations of pollutants than in the general environment. We know, for instance, that some workers in the auto industry are at higher risk for lung cancer and laryngeal cancer.
Electrical workers, road construction workers, roofers, welders, healthcare workers, even office workers face the possibility of particular exposures.
Cancer prevention efforts must not ignore the impact of the workplace on overall cancer rates.
I've worked for jobs that do use toxic chemicals. I refused to be present while they were used, though, just because there were no gas masks available for me.
I did use chemicals. I used to work cleaning a hospital, and they had a lot of chemicals.
My brother, as a young man, developed leukemia, and when I look back at his exposures, he worked as a furniture stripper for a while. It was a way to make a living, and he was exposed a lot during that time frame in his life, over a couple of summers especially, to high concentrations of benzene and toluene, different industrial chemicals.
If young people are concerned about what's in their environment, asbestos, lead, all these things, it's going to have an enormous impact on when they're 60 and 70.
You will never be able to completely avoid exposure to carcinogens, especially the ones that exist in nature. But the less we are exposed, the better.
There are some cancer-causing agents that we can avoid simply by choosing not to smoke or by eating a healthy diet and exercising regularly. The more complicated question is, how do we avoid workplace or environmental carcinogens?
Before we can begin to tackle that question, we need to understand a few things about the cancer process.
What is cancer? I don't know.
I'll tell you. Cancer is an uncontrolled or erratic growth of cells. The process begins with an agent damaging the DNA of a cell. As a result of this damage, the cell may no longer know how to behave properly. It can confuse messages and follow the wrong course. It can also grow at an alarming rate, destroying healthy tissue in the process. Part of the cell may break away from its original position and move to other parts of the body, beginning to grow there. Cancer can be caused by a combination of both genetic and environmental factors. Its development is thought to be a multi-step process. It usually takes several years after exposure to a carcinogen before cancer begins to grow. This lag time, which is known as the latency period, normally takes 10 to 20 years, but it may even be in the range of 5 to 50 years.
Cancer can occur at any age, but as you get older, the risk goes up.
The cancer is not something that just happens when you're 60 years old, okay? It's really the result of early choices or opportunities or lack thereof. So the first jobs out of school, you know, wherever one chooses to work, however one chooses to live, you know, and those factors are highly related to your health.
A lot of chemicals can have an effect down the road, and you don't know how they will affect you maybe 20 years down the road from now. An example, I believe, was DDT. Now we're realizing how bad it actually is all this time after it was used.
The way that we set the pattern for ourselves while we're young has an effect on what happens 30 and 40 years later. And you know, when you're young, it's really hard to worry about 30 or 40 years from now.
So those early life experiences are very, very important.
When things go wrong in nature, it is an early warning sign for humans, because we are not separate from nature, but are an integral part of it.
We don't have to look much further than the plants, birds, and fish in our surrounding environments to get a sense of what risks we face.
Especially frightening are the images of fish with tumors caught in the water that sustains our community. If we continue to poison our environment, are we not in essence going to end up like fish out of water?